Okay, now I'd like to officially welcome everyone to the October National Forum, and it's great to see all the folks represented here. We just had my associate Brian Dunn introduce himself. Brian came from the commercial nuclear fleet. He served as a vice president level of nuclear engineering at a fleet of 5 nuclear plants. And Brian and I have been doing some very interesting work around the nuclear campus. And so that's what we'd like to share with you today. Some lessons learned that we'd like to bring you from some recent evaluations that we have conducted. And of course, very fascinating. So I hope this to be very interactive. Just to give you a quick background, a little over a year ago, we have started working in commercial nuclear power. Some of the recent work in nuclear plants included reactor scrams at Sequoia and Watts Bar, and also a very proactive look at past refueling outage performance at Davis-Besse, so we can identify adverse trends and fix them before the refueling outages at Davis-Besse. And so those are a lot of equipment-related issues and outage-related issues, and we're not really going to cover those today. But what we're really here to chat about, this is a couple of assessments that we've done, and they were primarily focused on issues with leadership and teamwork at the sites, 2 nuclear sites there that we just finished working at. And the premise behind these were some info documents for leadership and team effectiveness. That's how we structured the themes for BlueDragon in this case.
Yeah, so a couple things. One is, as some of you have dealt with info knows, they sometimes can become administrative in nature, but these 2 documents are very good. And your leadership and team effectiveness they sound like generic terms, but the way they structure these documents and the buckets they put these different issues in was actually very comprehensive, very effective, and very detailed, so you could really focus in on critical items that are needed to make a successful plan.
We found them so effective and so focused that Brian and I are considering turning this into a standard self-assessment that BlueDragon can do for nuclear sites. We have 8 lessons learned for you, 8 themes of lessons, if you will. So Brian and I will talk through it, but really I want to pose it to you. What are you experiencing out there? Let me start with this. The complexity that modernizing brings, right? Some organizations are updating to things like SAP, to Maximo, but the way that we manage these large changes has sometimes been disastrous, right? You've already got complicated workflows. You sometimes you think that by going to electronic work control processes that you're going to make life easier, and it's the opposite effect. It can have the extreme opposite effect in making life a lot more complex. So complexity changes were a challenge. Centralizing engineering groups is something I have fun with because I'll tell the client sites, if you want to know about centralizing and decentralizing, Brian's done it 6 times. He has a book for each. And if you want to know how to centralize, here's this book, and decentralize, here's the other book. So just ask Brian, right? But that creates a lot of issues because of course, change management once again. And we did see that work controls is particularly challenging, not only because you have so many equipment issues, equipment reliability is a problem at a lot of these nuclear sites, but when you have burdensome work controls, people start working around them, and we saw that here, right? So, Brian, how about some other thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. One is that, and then it's the bottom bill. We found at one site there were 10 different lists they were managing their equipment reliability to, and everybody had their own list. And I still remember, if you're going to get yelled at for not being able to succeed because there's too much work, you're just going to work on what you want to do. And everybody was doing that different, and it really caused some massive misalignment and prioritization in the theme. And the other thing is, some of these new processes are just so complicated. The engineer's theme is if it's not broke, there's not enough features. So I get back to some simpler methods. Use the tools, but don't make a machine that you have to constantly feed. That's what I like to say.
Yeah, good point. We did see that in the spirit of modernization, we actually not manage it properly and are burying the organization with additional tasks. So be careful there. So now over to you. Which sites have been trying to modernize in various areas, and are you experiencing, the pains of and the challenges of what these modern applications might bring to the table? Susan, you were going to say
Hey,
something.
yes, so I can definitely feel the pain of the work controls process being changed. So we have a little bit of an antiquated system, and instead of maybe taking baby steps to ease into maybe a newer process, we've completely redesigned the entire work control system for all work. And this has like been an 8 year project or something crazy like that. So that alone should tell you that, holy cow, if it's going to take 8 years to build this system, that can't be the right pathway. Now, again, there's somewhere in the middle that should be correct, right? We can't always stay with antiquated systems, but we don't always need to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
All right, going on to lessons learned number two, blind spots in leadership. Here's what we have to say about that. Here's what we found. Imagine supervisors and managers that don't have either the time or the ability to model desired behaviors and coach and reinforce desired behaviors in the field. In some cases, they didn't have enough knowledge and experience in the nuclear field. In some cases, they were just caught in reactive firefighting, and there was just too much going on for them to actually handle all of the priorities that came with their job, with their roles and responsibilities. And a lot of things that are supposed to be done right in a formal way became nothing more than check the box issues, right? Let's just get this done. Let's check it off, no matter what the quality. And so here's that middle one that I really like. The organization became focused on closing quickly the symptoms rather than durable fixes. You're going to hear that theme quite a bit in some other slides, right? And so we're not getting the right actions, the right results that we really want. And we're reinforcing and rewarding those reactive behaviors to sort of put the fires out, right? So we reward firefighting. And we used to say jumping on hand grenades. And the last one in this section is we we have had management that are deciding how to run the organization and not really, taking the feedback from the workers. The impact on these decisions can be vast and dramatic, and it can really disturb what is going on at the sites and how much they trust in their leadership. And if they feel like the decisions are being made to pad their bonuses, that's even worse. This is probably worse at the DOE sites where we have millions in fees available at the end of the year based on performance. So if decisions are being made in order to maximize the key performance indicators in order to meet your year-end bonuses, folks, especially the bargaining unit, are going to be wary of that, and they're really not going to trust some of the decision making.
Yeah, and this was apparent at a few of the stations, and the senior leaders were either unwilling or unable to really get down to the people and hear what was going on. When we in the focus groups, they were pretty forward about sharing what the problems were, what the issues they face, and frankly, sometimes it's a lot easier for the senior leadership to say, "Hey, get everything done," as opposed to make the hard choices and listen to the people, figure out what it really takes, and then get to the root of the problem. So the BlueDragon methodology, where you get the focus groups and get all the levels, really helps highlight the blind spots in the leadership team have. And when you're done, something that's right there in black and white, it's hard for them to argue with. So to me, it's a service to the leadership team because they weren't getting that communication, from the field, from the lower levels in the organization, whether it's, designed that way or just didn't know how.
Are your sites experiencing some of these same blind spots?
Yeah, Rob, I can add. definitely from, what we saw, um, a part of that. So you kind of talk about, they're not in the field enough, supervisors, managers, because, they don't know how, or, maybe they haven't been shown how. Um, I think a big piece of that too was also just they're just too tied up in other meetings, right? And where does that come from? It kind of comes back to the corrective action program, right? If you don't have, if you're chasing other actions and you have an action in place every time you have an event, and those aren't, and those are just piling up over time, those are just taking away from effective field time that you're getting with your supervisors, right? So when you combine that with things like proficiency being lost in the industry, and a lot of major projects going on at a site, that can be kind of the perfect cocktail for a lot of that, right?
Thank you for that there, Corey. Anyone else? Corey, by the way, a recent BlueDragon graduate and a team member on one of our assessments.
Team lead.
Enjoyed working with Corey.
Not making it up.
So one thing that we've seen, Rob, is pretty much what you had on with the first two bullets on lessons learned. We've seen that throughout, throughout now on causal assessments that we've done. Right now, we've gone through leadership change, so we're hopeful that there's going to be a lot of changes because I think they're listening to us, and hopefully, they'll, you know, especially when we talk about the field presence. I know one of the things they're wanting to push are what are called echoes or somewhere like Gemba walks where leaders are really getting out in the field, and really becoming familiar with, what's going on. We've given examples to where we've been out there and we've been out there on a 2-hour stint just to observe what was going on. And we saw a lot of people bypassing, policies, procedures, and really almost like putting people at risk. The other thing that we've seen is when it comes to firefighting, we see, hey, let's just go and do uh, a quick improvement, really to sort of sit there and say we close it out, really, rather than really identifying what the root causes are to them. Oftentimes we'll hear, oh, do a quick 5Y or whatever, but it's like, okay, anybody can do that. But the thing is they really want to get down to the root to it so where it eliminates, future um, reoccurrences. This is what we need to do. So,
Very good. That's also a problem. That's also one of the lessons learned. Thanks for that, Robbie at Los Alamos. All right, in the next one, we have seen communication barriers up and down the food chain, vertical, horizontal, circular, any which way you call it. But the issue here is that the leadership team is not able to align the organization and establish clear priorities. If everything is a high priority and I've got 10 high priorities, I'm only able to do the first 5. What happens to the other 5? They either get the check the box attitude or they don't get done, right? And it's even worse when you have contradicting priorities, right? I'm expected to do this and that, and they contradict. That was something that was prevalent. Also, if we read here, there are things that go to management in management review meetings, MRMs, quarterly, monthly in some cases. And you also have equipment reliability. And I mentioned that separately because equipment reliability, ER, is a big, big deal at the vast majority of our sites, our nuclear sites and DOE facilities, probably the military, I'm guessing. But these management review boards are there to establish the alignment, the priorities, and hold the organization accountable to getting these things done. But it turns out these management meetings were not that effective from what we saw. And then a couple more here. Some of the managers were rotated way too quickly with a twofold effect. They cause a disruption in the organization that they're coming in and out of. It is part of the organizational development plan, but they're also not able to really hone in on what needs to be done and have those kind of long-lasting effects due to a good follow through with initiatives that have begun in the organization. And the personnel that are there are just not trusting that these people are going to be there for long. So they turn into weebies. We be here before you got here. We be here long after you're gone. We'll just wait you out if we don't like what you're saying. So some of that is taking place. And then this is a particularly disturbing one in my book when your meetings turn into just status for the sake of status and collecting data and metrics for the sake of managing and massaging your KPIs. And again, going back in some cases to meeting your year-end bonuses. And a lot of this is actually pulling people away from mission critical jobs, from being in the field doing their other roles and responsibilities, which are important.
Yeah, on the vertical communication, again, that really ties into prioritization and a well-functioning organization should have a written communication plan that and it's not just the fluffy, we're going to talk about these things, but specific methods, frequency, and who was doing the communication, what messages are sending, and how they aligned. And it should be all written down so everybody can pick up the playbook and have the same message. Some stations do that, a lot do not. So I'd encourage you to look at that. And then also, talk about using some of the newer methods of communication, like, everybody's on their phones with TikTok or whatever. I mean, get with the program, that's how people won elections. So, make sure your communication methods are up to speed. And then the meetings, I always put the meetings into three buckets. The first meeting is, I've got a serious problem with the plant and I need the years of experience of the senior team to get together and discuss it. And you need all that collective wisdom and interaction that everybody's talking. Those are the meetings that you need to keep. The second bucket is status meetings, as Rob mentioned. You just need to figure out a way to get rid of those, right? There's other ways to get status. I mean, you can have a few people go to meetings and there's even AI that can summarize the meeting and send it out to everybody and they can read it on their own time. And the third meeting is somebody calls a meeting because it's more efficient to solve their particular problem. So they have a problem, they call 20 people together, they have to solve it. 3 people talk, the other 17 listen, and you just wasted everybody's time for an hour. So the second and the third, you just got to get rid of those meetings. The first ones you keep because they're worth something.
Are your sites experiencing similar communication issues?
So, Rob, I can jump in again on this one. I think definitely the latter you just said with the too many meetings, we meet to death. But even more so, what I noticed, because I have the ability to, I'm crossing all organizations. What I see is more of a siloed communication. We work as almost independent organizations rather than a whole unit. And so we have those communications that they may be vertical, but they're only vertical and that's it, and they're not going broadly across the lab institutionally. And so, yeah, there's duplication of efforts that leads to not understanding the priorities or misprioritizing something or whatever it is. It is just a communication barrier for sure.
I got to give you this. What bothers me most about meetings, okay, have meetings. There has to be a return on investment for having these meetings. Brian mentioned the first one. You actually need the expertise of the group to actually move the football in the right direction. Okay, but if these review meetings and equipment reliability meetings, if you're not actually doing something positive and actually coming out with constructive actions that are going to move the needle, you're wasting time, a lot of resources. We heard from one client that they had a meeting that was attended by 80 people. And like Brian said, 5 people did the talking, and the other 75 sat there for the duration, spinning their wheels, doing nothing, right? You got to get rid of those kind of meetings. So unless you're going to accomplish something, think hard what the meeting is really all about. Okay.
In my experience, you need to be almost ruthless about, like, we implemented a time you had to be invited and to participate because a lot of people, they want to know what's going on. There's a lot of politics, but if you weren't invited, you were not allowed to attend that meeting. So I mean, we got ruthless. I'd use the word.
Yeah, love it. Lesson learned number 4, misalignment of incentives. All right. And so here we go. We reward as a leadership team firefighting and jumping on hand grenades as opposed to proactive problem solving. And this is prevalent. I experienced this decades ago in the sites, and then I got the DOE, same thing, right? that means that you're not really focusing in on the long-term fixes. Okay, moving on. Workers are also perceiving once again that the reason for incentivizing these short-term fixes is due to making the metrics, meeting the numbers, so that senior management can get their bonuses. And again, what all this is signaling is that our incentives are really not aligned with safe, reliable performance at our power plants. And the next one, the last one here, the day-to-day firefighting, call it that, is routinely overcoming any long-range strategies that we have for actually solving our organizational issues and our equipment reliability issues, right? Short-term mentality, once again. The corrective action program is not helping either, right? Corrective actions are also completely fixated on getting past the issue, not solving any systemic problems. So let me bring Corey back on this one. Corey, I think you have some things to say about this one.
It comes back to priorities coming from different groups too. So, it's some days what we heard a lot was some days workers are being told one thing and then another day another thing, right? And it's generally um what that priority at one of these meetings was decided to be that day. And when you combine that with maybe not always communicating down, like we talked about in the first point, a lot of the communication not being vertical enough, that creates that mistrust and um, reactive versus proactive communication, right?
Going on to number 5, educational system gaps. All right, from the basic standpoint, if you bring in resources from the outside and they don't know anything about nuclear power, right off the bat, you got one arm tied behind your back, right? So they're not able to jump in. Here's what we found out. Some organizations believe that because you hire someone with an engineering degree, that that's what they need to be successful, or an MBA, that that's all they need to be successful. And I'm sorry, it's not just about managing per the book. It's also understanding how these places operate. There's a lot of multiple systems involved to how we operate these nuclear plants. If you do a systems inventory about the entire site, it is massive, right? Very good. And so we're seeing that in some cases, when you do this kind of hiring from the outside, the supervisors are having to supervise or manage upwards to help that new manager. And that takes them away from doing things like being in the field, reinforcing desired behaviors. So that's going on. Also, from the educational perspective on the CAP, on the corrective action program side, that was also pretty weak. So we see a lack of structured guidance. We see minimal training of individuals to do this kind of work. And there's not a lot of good skills out there for doing the deep dives, the deep root causes, which is actually what's going to prevent recurrence when you identify those deepest issues. Another thing that was very interesting, why would you kill effective training programs and replace it with read and sign? Well, usually to save money. In fact, that is so prevalent. That's in one of my case studies as one of the root causes. But in one of the cases at one of the national laboratories earlier in the year, we had electrical safety worker training that was completely hacked to pieces. And one of the things that was done for annual recall was that you got this little card, and the little card was an uncontrolled operator aid. So now you got this card that's out of date, doesn't reflect reality, doesn't match the requirements, and this is the card that you're using to train people for recall.
Yeah, not only was there not training, but these new managers and supervisors who were coming in with no specifics on how to do their job. I mean, most of you have large procedure networks where your roles, responsibility, requirement are probably distributed over hundreds of procedures. So not only did they not have an effective turnover from the last guy, they came in and they go, okay, your job, what do I do today, tomorrow, next week, next month? And Rob knows one of my pet peeves is core business and to document that knowledge of how to run a department. And so you'd have no turnover, no training, and no document of core business of how do you run your department. And it takes forever for somebody to figure out how to run a department. I mean, it takes a while for you to figure out how to run a department, even if you have all those things. So, and all those is a severe gap in leadership and managing how you do your business.
And that's one of the things we're looking to adopt here at OPG now, having done our BlueDragon assessment, is those core business structure documents for leaders. Brian's grinning, but in operations and maintenance for starters, for sure, just to have that daily, quarterly, weekly, monthly, what you shall do and what you're responsible for, kind of consolidate it to one place, have it high enough level that you're not going to be audited on it or anything like that. Um, but a guide of what you don't know, per se, such that yeah, ideally you might get a good turnover with the person, but generally if you're coming in, it's because somebody's moved on already, and you're not always going to get enough time. So it can at least help with that technical piece, while you get that more general leadership training, right? That we can kind of deliver no matter where your position is.
All right, the next one, outdated problem-solving paradigms. And Brian has his pet peeves. This is mine, as you can well imagine. And so, to my chagrin, I found this out only this year. The fact that the Nuclear Energy Institute issued a document back in 2016 called "Reducing the Cumulative Impact from the Corrective Action Program," and it was part of the nuclear energy promise, which said, let's try to reduce the load on the nuclear sites. What this document ended up doing is killing root cause analysis, saying things like, oh, you need to do it. If you think you know the answer, don't do it. Really? Your brain is capable of doing root cause, so you think you know the answers. That's the first thing that struck me. And then, of course, it says like, oh, just close it out to work orders and anything else that's going on. The whole point was just close out condition reports as fast and as easy as possible. That changed the culture, and I really fault NEI for that. I wish I could have a private engagement with them. Uh, Next, we've seen that there's not really enough RCA trained specialists at these sites, and the training that you do get, the old-fashioned tools from the 1920s to the 1970s. Trending and analysis is one of the things that NEI did harp on. All right, so if you're not doing the root causes now, at least trend and analyze data and then do some deeper analysis. Well, um, this is also not done very well. And in fact, one site was using what they called cognitive training. What is that? That just means that as these CRs come through you, you look at them, and if you think you see a trend, you say something. So it's all in your brain. So I'm doing trending and analysis of 10,000 rows on an Excel spreadsheet. In one case, 26,000 rows. Tell me that your brain can analyze that with about 40 columns and 10,000 rows. Cognitive trending is not a real thing. I'm sorry. Okay. Next. That same organization that was doing cognitive trending, out of the 26,000 reports that I evaluated, only 189 did any kind of causal analysis. And in 7 years, 8 years, almost 8 years, they had only done 2 root causes in 8 years out of 26,000 events, condition reports. That is a telling sign as to what they thought of the root cause analysis and corrective action program. You can bet that their corrective actions were not effective. Another thing is they are using Power BI. They like to put spreadsheets on Power BI, and it'll do some analysis for you. But sophisticated trending is a little bit more than what Power BI does. Unless you're a super master of Power BI. But I saw Power BI being used for flashy purposes, not really having the desired results. And the use of AI for training and analysis is not very prevalent. And so I think there's a huge gap that can be closed there. And then when we take these issues, this condition reports and the corrective action plans to the management review meetings, maybe the corrective action review boards, the CARBs, well, they're kind of pushing back and trying to actually go back to the superficial, symptomatic kind of closures, like try not to go too deep. Don't look for the systemic problems. Keep it at the symptom level. And whether that's on purpose or because they don't know any better, it was hard to tell. But this is actually happening as well. Brian?
Yeah, I have instructions to rein Rob in when he gets too hard on NEI, but he's absolutely right. The reason NEI did that is because the root causes that we were doing were taking so long and they were really bad. I mean, the one I still remember, my favorite root cause was somebody didn't follow the procedure. So I got this inch thick document of all this analysis, and the corrective action was to revise the procedure. So it was really bad. And then the trending, I mean, people used to have entire departments. I mean, with AI, Rob is not to be self-serving. Rob is the best I've ever seen as far as data analysis and trending. He could teach you how to trend your whole site, and it would take you a week out of the month, and you could go on vacation for the other 3 weeks and do all the department training. So AI is going to really change that, and then you can focus on when you get the trends, then you can go analyze those and figure out what you're really going to do with them.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate the plug, by the way. What I do fault NEI for was, and NEI is just made up of executives from the commercial nuclear power plants. Where I find fault with what they did with that document, 2016-10, instead of actually pushing for improving the model, improve the model, make it more efficient, more accurate, lean it out, right? No, they decided to drop root cause analysis instead of improving the model. That, I think, was the fatal flaw.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, in this case, anyone else have things to say? This is actually a good one to bring in Commander Jeremiah, because I think, and I've made this publicly known, that the Joint Force is actually further behind the power curve than the energy sector.
I agree with what you're saying. Only, so I have to use my background not for the Joint Force, but being naval nuclear trained in how we handle on the nuclear, side of the house, problems, corrective actions, root cause analysis when an incident happens or occurs. Moving into the surface community where I drive ships and stuff, they're not as technical minded when it comes to actually going after it. There is more of the, hey, fix the problem, move on, and fixing the problem with the quickest solution is generally who is at fault, take corrective action on them, do training, and then move along. We don't do a good enough job, I think, in the officer community at large at like doing this type of training and talking about that stuff and how to do actual analysis for systemic issues. And then I would say in the joint community, when you put all the services together, there's like almost no bandwidth at all for that. As you get more joint, you also get a little more strategic and operational. So when things don't happen, everything is moving so fast. There's almost no time to actually take a breath and digest where things are wrong. You almost have, I don't want to say unlimited resources, but you have a lot of resources to fix the problem, and it doesn't have to look pretty doing it. As long as it gets done, mission completion, move on to the next thing. And we are so. This is Amy and Jeremiah's opinion, so please don't put this out there. I would just say inefficient in how we communicate, in how we solve problems, and certainly the follow-up on just getting the job done. There's never looking. I don't want to say never. We don't do a good job looking back at like, hey, let's we just finished a mission or operation. Let's sit down and actually talk about what went wrong, what could go better, how can we make process improvements. I mean, I work at a combatant command, and literally in the past 2 years that I had been there, we have people that do assessments. We have people that are supposed to be involved in the lessons learned, and there's not a lot of accountability there. There's not a lot of participation. There's not a lot of after any of that stuff is actually done, there's actually training on it and process improvement or implementation. It just doesn't happen.
Thank you, Amy, for that self-disclosure there. No, I mean, all we have to do is look at two indicators. One is the sexual assaults in the military. Another one is suicides per 100,000 active duty members. If you look at those trends going back 15 years, they're positive, meaning the wrong direction, and they are not slowing down. But we have spent billions of dollars and put many programs in place and had 200 plus congressional acts. They're not solving it because they don't know how. They don't have the skill set. So anyway, this is a big problem in every industry, sad to say. Commercial nuclear is also just as bad. Yes, sir,
Can you-
Jason. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I agree with every single one that you've done so far. Like coming from Watts Bar, VC Summer, Vogel, UPF, and now ORNL, I've seen all of it throughout my career, and I like that you mentioned the lack of accountability because I think that is one of the systemic problems in all of these sites is that there is no accountability. You have procedures, you have things in place, but if people don't do it, they don't get in trouble. If there's no response, there's no no retribution, there's nothing that happens. So I think that is a very, very big problem within all of these facilities.
Funny that you mentioned that because, Jason, in one of our recent analyses, we found out that it's too difficult to hold the bargaining unit accountable. You know, there's not a lot of tools available until there's actually some kind of a tripwire and you're into full-blown disciplinary action. But the lower level management feels like it's really, really difficult to do anything. The supervisors to hold the workers accountable for the little things, right? Until they turn into bigger things. So that is a problem, and that's a challenge. Yeah. All right. Anyone else?
Vicky had something on the chat.
Vicky, I think we do a better job looking at trends, extent of causes, extent of conditions at the corporate level. Yes. And addressing them at that level rather than having stovepiped causals and only looking within centers for similar issues. I couldn't agree with you more. One of the things that I've done when I go out to these sites, and I mentioned 10,000 rows spreadsheets, 26,000 rows of information, because I take the entire enterprise and analyze it using multi-tier Pareto analysis with the help of AI. And that gives us huge insights. And guess what? Most organizations put blinders on and they only look in their little piece of the pie. So I completely agree with you, Vicky. Thank you so much for prompting that. All right. Speaking of the cost of all of this, so let's talk about equipment reliability. Number one, that's what eats our lunch the most, right? We spend lots of money on during outages and other times fixing our equipment. And when we allow these things to get behind, like one of the sites that we did an assessment of, we had a huge bow wave of preventive maintenance activities in second grace periods. And you look at the bow wave as it's forming, and then you start seeing the equipment reliability trending in the wrong direction, right? Uh, and same thing for corrective actions. There's a lot of issues going down that in equipment reliability that have caused down rates in these reactor scrams. And you know what? I'm not sure they're factoring in all these costs in some kind of a real spreadsheet, right? That's one of the things that I think could be done. And we have a spreadsheet of the hidden cost calculator where we looked at specifically the condition reporting system. And when we did one at a nuclear site for 2013, the cost of these 16,000 condition reports was over $32 million. They didn't know that until we went through the exercise. Well, we've done the exercise at various sites as well, and the cost there at the DOE sites is between 10 and 20 million a year. So when we pull out this spreadsheet and have the sites fill it out, it is a shocker. And of course, that time away from your mission critical stuff is the other piece of it, in addition to the cost of doing this. So it's a double negative. You're losing time and you're losing money dealing with these issues year after year. Next, in one case, imagine the admin burden from having 26,000 individual corrective actions and 1,000 self-assessments and their corrective actions, what it does to consume your resources, just documenting them. and then addressing them in some way. And then what is the return on investment if you really don't do anything with this, if you don't trend and analyze and escalate? Um, and of course, what is the cost of the leadership being stuck and doing things that are not the best use of their time and energy? Because as we said earlier, they're stuck in meetings. They're stuck in useless meetings, meetings that don't move the needle, meetings that don't solve problems. Their lack of return on investment is what we're trying to talk about here. Your activities, everything you do is like writing a check. You're writing a check for that body to go out and do something. Well, did writing the check for that person to go out and do something give you a return, or was it a negative sum game? That also applies to oversight groups like QA, right? Is QA, when they go out and do their assessments, are they giving you a positive sum game where there's value to their findings, or negative sum gain where the findings are garbage, everyone knows what they are, there's nothing new there, but it's going to take time and money to process those findings? So let's open it up to you all. What do you think about the economic impact that all of these things together, being in too many meetings, right? Not addressing the equipment reliability issues, not understanding how to solve problems, not training and analyzing your low level issues so you can escalate. Everything that we're talking about here has an impact.
Yeah, no, not only the direct cost that Rob's talking about, but you also got the indirect avoidance costs, and sometimes that's the most difficult to convince people to invest in this kind of activity, is to prove the avoidance costs. So, but even the direct obvious costs, I don't think people think of it that way.
Yeah, let's talk about indirect costs as well. What about loss of regulatory trust and confidence, right?
Yeah.
You have enough issues with your equipment reliability goes down, you start having outages and reactor scrams, all of a sudden you get downgraded, all of a sudden you're in a NRC white space or an IMPO 3, and it is a complete loss of control of your own destiny at that point.
Yeah, you need to, IMPO or the 95002 can cost millions. So
We're not using the BlueDragon calculator, but we are implementing a new process to start capturing some of these costs so we can bring it to management and say, hey, this is costing you this much. So we're trying to track that better. The tracking and trending needs work at the lab too. We've got thousands of issues and they don't really track and trend. Every single time I say, where's your trend that you've had for all these issues? They always say, well, this is just new. And it goes back to Susan's point of being siloed in all these different organizations and programs. They're not looking at it across the entire laboratory. So, but yes, we are.
I think everyone can echo what you're saying. We know that to be the case. Very good. The resistance to systemic solutions. Okay, we have got a just enough culture going on at these energy sites, right? Checking the box, normalizing short-term fixes, right? Constantly shifting high priorities. All of that is undermining real improvement. And then we have the cumbersome processes that are driving workarounds, right? Work controls being one of the main ones. And here's, again, one of the highlights of all of this is that management is encouraging a bias towards symptomatic fixes over systemic solutions. I want you to read that one carefully, right? This is at the senior management level. They're pushing the easy fixes to get past it very quickly, check the box, as opposed to looking for the deep-seated latent organizational and programmatic weaknesses. And then the admin burden that's created by these cumbersome processes and procedures, right, is worsening conditions. It's not really helping fix anything. So bad corrective actions at the symptomatic level adds more training and more procedures, which worsen your conditions. Doesn't help solve anything. Doesn't help prevent future more serious issues, because you're not really getting to the deeper seated problems. So all this works together to make things worse. And bottom line, this is the last line item here. Despite declining performance, these executive oversight, the management review boards and all that, they're not really heightened. And I don't know if it's because they don't have the information to manage by, right? Do they have enough indicators of the right type to let them know that the plant is not doing well? Or are they massaging their indicators for the sake of their bonuses? All this is a mystery, but we're saying that management is not doing enough, and it is a sign of resistance to systemic change at the highest levels of these organizations. Brian?
Yeah, and resistance to change, it also, as part of it, BlueDragon Evaluator, you got to look at some of the barriers. A lot of these deep-rooted issues are actually pointed directly at leadership. So you're almost, telling themselves to take a hard look in the mirror. And some people in those positions that are more political animals than real leaders,
Yeah,
will not like that.
this is universal, folks, and I'm sure it's the same way across many industries. As are all these 8 lessons, these themes are universal across many, many industries. They're not just applied to us and to nuclear. I wanted to give you this last slide. This is it. This is to say artificial intelligence is here to stay. We used in phase 1 Copilot for Excel. It was awesome to do all the Pareto charts I needed to do. Researcher for Copilot or ChatGPT to report, to look at reports, analyze all kinds of information. And here's one of the things that we did learn. Our clients actually had their own data sets or bots, AI bots, with all of their procedures preloaded. That really cuts the corner in terms of systems inventory. All we need is the performance, and then we ask the bot, hey, find me the requirements for this piece of evidence. Right? So it is so much more advantageous if your organization, like Robbie Harris, did you guys already have your AI loaded with all your site procedures? That's
No, it's one thing that
huge.
we've been talking about, and we sort of thrown it out there, but no, we totally concur.
Now we see the vast benefits. So Nuclear at Vistra and Chat OPG in Canada, phenomenal. They had that. All right, next for phase 2, the lesson there was they need a lot of time to put together focus groups. And so Corey and company over there in Darlington, they did a great job of getting everything set more than a week in advance because we kind of knew already who we needed to talk to. So scheduling the focus groups is of huge importance to do it in 3-4 days and be done with phase 2. And then 95% of the analysis is done at that point. So Corey and company were very efficient there. Loved it. And then in phase 3, writing your reports, AI will help you there as well. I simply made a PDF of each grouping of cause and effect sequences for each individual root cause, loaded that PDF. AI was able to read it and create a beautiful narrative for the sections of the report that we needed. So all that to say is that AI is here to stay. Learn it, love it, because it makes life so much easier. And with that, that concludes our presentation. I'm sorry I went over a little bit. Any comments about any of today's presentation?
Before I go, I just say again, I recognize all of those lessons learned, especially the prevalence of the degree, especially at the national labs. I know they're national labs and they're with the universities, but if you don't have a PhD, they do not want you in a position. And I think that's a mistake, because if you listen to a lot of the older people that were at the labs that made the labs great, they came from industry, or they came in and they got their PhDs, they got their masters throughout their career, but they didn't have to have their PhD just to get the job and get their foot in the door. So I think they really need to work on that also, to draw on that knowledge and bring people into the fold.
Excellent
So thank
point.
you for your presentation.
Excellent point. Thank you, Jason. Thanks for your participation as well. Before we get too far down the road and everyone starts to leave, I wanted to thank Brian, my associate here. We work together very closely and we're pretty much in sync on everything. So it's great to work with someone like that. Okay, that's it for this month. Thank you for joining the October BlueDragon National Forum, and we look forward to seeing everyone next month. Take care, everyone.